Media Fact Checker. First NFL regular season game in Australia at MCG between Rams and 49ers on September 11th. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The first NFL regular season game in Australia will be played at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, MCG, on Friday, September 11th, 2025, between the Los Angeles Rams and San Francisco 49ers. The kickoff time for the game is 10:35 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. General admission tickets will start at $140 and standing room tickets at $95, with sales beginning April 8, 2025, at 10 a.m. via Ticketmaster. The NFL ANZ General Manager is Charlotte Orford. The game coincides with the AFL's semi-final weekend, potentially causing scheduling conflicts for Victorian clubs. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the game is a regular season fixture, while Newscomer refers to it as the NFL opening round, though both clarify it is a regular season game. Newscomer mentions the game was originally expected in October but moved to September 11th, while ABC does not mention this shift in timing. ABC does not mention the NFL Academy on the Gold Coast or Australia's flag football program, which Newscomer highlights. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Daly Cherry-Evans returned to Manly-Warringah Sea Eagles as a Rooster player and its emotional impact on both club and fans. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Daly Cherry-Evans made his first appearance for the Roosters at Brookvale Oval after leaving Manly-Warringah Sea Eagles in the off-season. The match took place on the opening day of the 2026 NRL season, with Manly losing 33-16 to the Roosters. Cherry-Evans was booed by Manly fans during warm-ups, team introductions, and throughout the game. Manly scored two long-range tries early in the game, one by Tom Trbojevic, 90m, within 30 seconds of kickoff, and another by Tulu Kula. Cherry-Evans completed 22 20-seconds passes, 100% accuracy, in challenging wet conditions for the Roosters. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 mentions the Roosters had 15 players to choose from, while Articles 2 and 3 do not specify this detail. Article 1 states the Roosters had 49 tackles in Manly's half in the first 40 minutes, but Articles 2 and 3 do not provide this specific number. Article 1 notes the Roosters had 9 tackles in their own half in the first 40 minutes, while Articles 2 and 3 do not mention this exact figure. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory flooding from ex-tropical Cyclone Narelle and ongoing riverine threats in March 2026. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ex-tropical cyclone Narelle dumped heavy rain across the Northern Territory over the weekend of early March 2026, triggering widespread flooding. The Katherine River peaked at 19.2 meters on March 7, 2026, marking Katherine's worst flooding in nearly 30 years, 28 years. Adelaide River experienced flooding on Monday, March 3, 2026, with homes inundated, including one property that flooded in 2007 despite flood mitigation efforts. The Bureau of Meteorology, BOM, issued major flood warnings for the Adelaide River, Roper River, Waterhouse River, and Daly River systems in early March 2026. Flood evacuees from communities like Numbulwar, Palumpa, and Daly River Now were relocated to bachelor education facilities for longer-term shelter. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Katherine River was predicted to reach major flood levels within 24 hours at Katherine Bridge on Tuesday morning, March 4, 2026, while Article 2 reports the river peaked just below the major flood level on Thursday morning, March 6, 2026, after peaking just above it on Thursday morning, March 6, 2026, likely a date confusion. Article 1 claims the Katherine River was predicted to reach major flood levels at Katherine Bridge from Tuesday morning, March 4, 2026, while Article 2 states the river peaked just below the major flood level on Thursday morning, March 6, 2026, after peaking just above it earlier that day. Potential timeline discrepancy. Article 1 reports the BOM said the Catherine River was predicted to rise again at Catherine Bridge from Tuesday morning, March 4, 2026, while Article 2 states the river was already falling after peaking just below the major flood level on Thursday morning, March 6, 2026. Potential conflicting timelines. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's 6-month ban on Iranian tourist visa holders amid regional conflict. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke announced a 6-month ban on Iranian nationals with valid tourist visas, subclass 600, from entering Australia, effective from June 2024. The ban applies to over 7,000 Iranian visa holders outside Australia, excluding those already in transit or with exemptions, e.g., spouses, children of Australian citizens or parents of Australian children under 18. The government cited concerns that some Iranian visa holders may not be able to return to Iran due to the ongoing conflict, risking overstaying visas and undermining migration system integrity. The ban was enacted under an arrival control determination, a temporary measure requiring ministerial renewal after 6 months. Tony Burke stated that many visas issued before the conflict in Iran would not have been granted if applied for now, emphasizing deliberate government decisions on permanent residency. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC, Article 5, report that Iranian parents of Australian citizens will receive sympathetic consideration, but the ABC, Article 3, does not specify whether this is guaranteed or case by case without further detail. The Guardian and ABC, Article 6, highlight that the ban was passed with less than 1 hour's debate in Parliament, while news.com.au does not mention the duration of debate but frames it as controversial new powers. The Guardian and ABC, Article 5, emphasize that the ban disproportionately affects Iranian families, framing it as a racist or brutal move compared to support for other war-affected groups, though no source directly contradicts the factual application of the ban itself. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal government urges Fair Work Commission for above-inflation minimum wage hike amid cost of living pressures. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Albanese government submitted to the Fair Work Commission's annual wage review asking for an economically sustainable real wage increase for 2.7 million minimum wage and award-reliant workers in Australia. About 2.7 million Australians, roughly a quarter of the workforce, are on the national minimum wage or award-reliant jobs. The current minimum wage is $175.40 per week, higher than when the Albanese government took office in 2022. The Fair Work Commission's upcoming decision will take effect from July 1, 2026. The Reserve Bank of Australia raised the official cash rate to 4.1% on March 17, 2026, marking the second consecutive hike in 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the minimum wage is currently $175.40 per week, higher than in 2022, while ABC does not provide this specific figure. ABC reports that the Business Council of Australia advocates for real wage increases backed by productivity improvements, but News Kamau does not mention this perspective. News Kamau does not mention the ACTU's call for a 5% increase or ACCI's request for 3.5%, which ABC includes. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's 2026 daylight saving transition dates and regional clock changes. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Daylight saving in Australia ends on the first Sunday of April annually. Clocks move back 1 hour on the end date, turning 3 a.m. local time back to 2 a.m. Daylight saving ends in most Australian states and territories, exact list not specified in both sources. The end of daylight saving occurs in April 2026, specific year not mentioned but implied by context. Daylight saving begins again in October 2026, on Sunday, October 4th. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention Easter Sunday alignment for 2026, while ABC explicitly states it ends on Easter Sunday, April 5th. ABC provides US-UK daylight saving timings, while The Guardian does not include these comparisons. The Guardian omits the reason for Sunday changes, school business disruption, which ABC attributes to legislation. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NSW introduces laws to crush illegal high-speed e-bikes and related policy debates. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. NSW government will introduce legislation today to give police and transport for NSW officers powers to seize and crush e-bikes operating over 25 km per hour, even if bought in error. The laws include new roadside dyno units to test e-bike speed, modelled after existing WA laws. NSW Transport Minister John Graham stated, "If it behaves like a motorbike, it's probably illegal and could end up in the crusher." A two-day safety blitz in NSW last week issued 170 fines for illegal e-bikes. The NSW government aims to introduce a minimum age for e-bike riders between 12 and 16, exact age yet to be decided. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Victorian schools will remain open but many will operate at reduced capacity with limited supervision, while news.com.au does not mention Victorian school disruptions. The Guardian states Queensland's e-bike laws will restrict use to over 16 riders and enforce a 10 km/h footpath limit, but news.com.au does not reference these specifics, only that Queensland will endorse 28 recommendations. The Guardian mentions a 12 to 16 minimum age for NSW e-bike riders, undecided, while news.com.au does not specify an age range for NSW's proposed minimum age. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Hong Kong's new law requiring password disclosure to police under national security law. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A new Hong Kong law, amended national security law, requires individuals to surrender phone or computer passwords to police if suspected of endangering national security, effective from June 2024. Failure to comply with the password disclosure law carries a maximum penalty of 1 year in prison and a fine of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars, $18,000 or $12,773 depending on source. The law was imposed by Beijing in 2020 following pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong in 2019. The law applies to anyone under investigation for national security offences, including those who own or possess the electronic devices or know the password. As of 2024, 386 people have been arrested for national security crimes in Hong Kong, with 176 people and 4 companies convicted. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the fine for non-compliance is 100,000 Hong Kong dollars, $18,000, while The Guardian reports it as 100,000 Hong Kong dollars, $12,773. ABC states the law came into force on Monday, implied June 2024, but The Guardian does not specify the exact date beyond it being gazetted in June 2024. ABC mentions the law applies to any password or other decryption method, while The Guardian focuses on mobile phone or computer passwords without explicitly mentioning broader decryption methods. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory flooding and recovery from ex-tropical Cyclone Narelle's rainfall in March 2026. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ex-tropical cyclone Narelle dumped heavy rain across the Northern Territory over the weekend of March 2026, triggering widespread flooding. The Catherine River peaked at 19.2 meters on March 7, 2026, marking Catherine's worst flood in 28 years. The Bureau of Meteorology, BOM, issued major flood warnings for the Catherine River, Waterhouse River, Roper River, Daly River, and Adelaide River systems in March 2026. Adelaide River experienced flooding on Monday, March 2026, with multiple homes inundated, including one property that flooded despite flood mitigation efforts, a wall built after a 2007 flood. The BOM predicted the Catherine River would reach the major flood level, 17.5 meters, at Catherine Bridge by Wednesday morning, March 2026, before receding by Thursday. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Catherine River was expected to exceed the moderate flood level, 16.5 m, early Wednesday morning, while Article 2 reports the river peaked just above 17.5 m on Thursday morning and was already receding. Article 1 mentions the Catherine River was expected to reach major flood levels again on Wednesday, but Article 2 states the river had already peaked just above 17.5 m on Thursday and was falling. Article 3 reports the BOM predicted minor flooding at Catherine Bridge from Tuesday morning with a potential rise to major flood levels within 24 hours, while Article 4 states the river was sitting just below the minor flood level, 16 m, on Tuesday afternoon. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Meta ordered to pay $375 million in New Mexico child exploitation case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A New Mexico jury found Meta liable for violating New Mexico's consumer protection law in a case alleging misleading claims about child safety on Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. $375 million, $538 million including penalties, was ordered as civil payment by the jury, the maximum penalty under New Mexico's Unfair Practices Act, $5,000 per violation. The trial lasted 6 weeks, ABC, and nearly 7 weeks, Guardian, with jury deliberation taking less than a day. New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres accused Meta of enabling child sexual exploitation and prioritizing profits over child safety, citing internal documents and undercover investigations. Meta plans to appeal the verdict and stated it works to keep users safe despite challenges in identifying harmful content. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the trial lasted 6 weeks, while The Guardian reports it lasted nearly 7 weeks. The Guardian mentions Meta's AI moderation generated junk reports that hindered law enforcement, but ABC does not mention this specific detail. ABC highlights Meta's lawyer arguing the company did not knowingly lie, while The Guardian emphasizes Meta executives' testimony that harms to children were inevitable due to platform scale. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government halving fuel excise amid global fuel crisis and Iran war impact. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government will halve the fuel excise from 52.6 cents per litre to 26.3 cents per litre for 3 months, effective from Wednesday the 28th of March, 2024, saving motorists 26.3 cents per litre, mentioned in Articles 1, 4, 5, 6, 9. The heavy vehicle road user charge will be reduced to 0 for the same 3-month period, Articles 4, 5, 6, 9. The cost of the excise cut and road user charge reduction is estimated at $2.55 billion, Articles 4, 6, 9. The National Cabinet agreed on a 4-stage fuel security plan, Plan and Prepare, Keeping Australia Moving, Taking Targeted Action, and Protecting Critical Services, Articles 5, 8, 9. Australia imported about 90% of its diesel supplies, Article 1. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC reported that Angus Taylor proposed ending the fringe benefits tax exemption for electric cars to fund the excise cut, but the government dismissed this as cutting schemes helping with the cost of living, Articles 3, 9. The Guardian stated that the excise cut would be passed on to consumers immediately on Wednesday, Article 1, while the ACCC report cited in multiple sources indicated a 6-week lag in price reductions during the 2022 excise cut, Articles 1, 3. The Guardian reported that NSW Premier Chris Minns did not oppose the excise cut at National Cabinet, Article 1, but ABC reported that Minns had previously said he was not worried about shortages and encouraged consumers to act responsibly, Article 1 versus Article 3. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement, Farmers' Criticism versus Government Support. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was announced on Tuesday after 8 years of negotiations between Ursula von der Leyen, EU, and Anthony Albanese, Australia. The deal includes tariff-free exports for Australian wine, with industry estimates of $14.5 million in annual savings for wine exporters. Australian beef exporters will gain access to 30,600 tonnes of beef and 25,000 tonnes of lamb to the EU under the agreement, ABC, 30,600 beef, Newskamau, 35,000 beef, 31,000 lamb. The agreement removes the passenger vehicle tariff, 5% tax, on EU-sourced vehicles and introduces a lower luxury car tax, LCT, rate for electric vehicles. The National Farmers Federation, NFF, President Hamish McIntyre criticised the deal, calling it the worst ever and warning of long-term disadvantages for red meat exporters. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports beef quotas at 30,600 tonnes, while Newskamau reports 35,000 tonnes. Both claim these are the agreed figures but differ by 4,400 tonnes. ABC states lamb quotas are 25,000 tonnes, but Newskamau claims 31,000 tonnes, again differing by 6,000 tonnes. ABC describes the beef quota as a 700% boost, from 4,400 tonnes current, but does not attribute this claim to Farrell. Newskamau explicitly credits Farrell with this figure. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Dietary factors and the mind diet's role in preventing dementia and cognitive decline. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Mind Diet, Mediterranean-diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, is linked to a 19% reduced odds of developing mild cognitive impairment or dementia according to a 2019 study by Scientia Professor Karin Arnsti, UNSW, and a 2024 Lancet Commission update. The Mind Diet includes leafy greens, nuts, berries, olive oil, poultry, fish, and whole grains while limiting red meat, butter, cheese, fried foods, and sweets. A 2024 study found adherence to the Mind Diet preserved 20% more grey matter over 12 years, corresponding to a 2.5-year delay in brain aging, measured via brain scans. The Lancet Commission's 2024 report lists 14 modifiable risk factors for dementia, including high LDL cholesterol, 7% influence, untreated vision loss, 2%, hearing loss, 7%, depression, 3%, and low social contact, 5%. The APOE4 gene variant, present in tilde 25% of people, increases dementia risk, with tilde 2% having a variant linked to 10x higher risk, as noted in studies from The Age and ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age and ABC both report the Mind Diet's benefits, but The Age frames it as a delicious 15th factor for dementia prevention, explicitly calling for its inclusion in the Lancet report, while ABC presents it as not a cure and only one piece of a larger picture without advocating for its formal addition to risk factors. The Age states the brain scan study, 20% grey matter preservation, is more solid due to its objective outcome, while ABC acknowledges the Framingham study's observational nature and notes that adherence had other health advantages, e.g., non-smokers, lower BMI, undermining direct causal claims. The Age highlights that the APOE4 gene variant may benefit from unprocessed meat intake, contradicting the Mind Diet's general recommendation of 4 servings of red meat per week for the general population. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC staff 24-hour strike over pay and conditions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Over 2,000 ABC staff walked off the job for a 24-hour strike on Wednesday, the first in 2 decades. ABC switched to BBC World Service programming across TV, radio, and digital due to the strike. ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks offered a 10% total pay rise over 3 years, 3.5% in year 1, 3.25% in years 2 and 3. Staff voted 60-40 against the latest pay offer, with 75% of eligible staff participating in the vote. The strike was triggered by disputes over pay, below 3.8% annual inflation in January, work conditions, appraisal processes, night shift penalties, and reproductive health leave. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states over 2,000 staff walked off the job, while Article 3 reports approximately 1,200 MEAA members, out of 4,500 total staff, participated. Article 2 claims Marks said the strike was not about job security, it was about pay, but Article 1 describes the strike as an argument over how best to provide sustainable, secure work. Article 1 mentions ABC Radio Melbourne Sydney playing * Waiting for a Star to Fall * at 11 a.m, while Article 2 states Monsoon by Emma Louise and Flume began before cutting to NWA's * Express Yourself star. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US allows Russian oil tanker to deliver fuel to Cuba amid US blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Russian oil tanker Anatoly Kolodkin is carrying approximately 650,000 to 730,000 barrels of oil, 650,000 per Guardian, 730,000 per ABC, bound for Cuba's Matanzas port. The vessel is sanctioned by the US, EU, and UK due to the war in Ukraine. Cuba has faced a US oil blockade, leading to severe shortages of gasoline and electricity, with blackouts and rationing since at least 3 months, Guardian, or years, ABC. The oil shipment could supply Cuba's daily diesel demand for 9 to 10 days, producing about 180,000 barrels of diesel, ABC. Donald Trump stated in 2020, "I have no problem whether it's Russia or not regarding the tanker's delivery to Cuba, ABC." But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the tanker carries 730,000 barrels of oil, while The Guardian reports 650,000 barrels. ABC claims the vessel is named Anatoly Kolodkin and is Russian-flagged, but The Guardian does not specify the flag status beyond Russian-flagged in the headline. ABC mentions the Sea Horse, Hong Kong-flagged, was rerouted from Cuba to Venezuela with 200,000 barrels, but The Guardian does not reference this vessel. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sydney private school teacher charged with grooming a 14-year-old girl and accessing child abuse material. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Benjamin David Collinge, 29, was arrested on March 28, 2024, at his Beecroft home by NSW Police Sex Crimes Squad. Collinge allegedly posed as a 17-year-old boy to groom a 14-year-old girl via social media. The girl was not known to Collinge prior to their online interactions. Collinge was charged with using a carriage service to groom someone under 16 and accessing child abuse material. Collinge was refused bail at Burwood Local Court and remanded in custody until April 2, 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Collinge was arrested at 5:45 a.m., while SMH does not specify the exact arrest time. ABC does not mention the girl's parents contacting police on March 20, 2024, while SMH explicitly states this date. ABC does not reference the vulnerable descriptor for the girl, though SMH uses it in its headline and text. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government's temporary fuel excise cut and its economic implications. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government will halve the fuel excise, currently 52.6 cents per litre, for 3 months starting tomorrow, reducing the tax by 26.3 cents per litre. Treasurer Jim Chalmers estimates the excise cut will save Australians about $19 on a 65-litre tank of petrol. The fuel excise cut is expected to cost the government around $2.55 billion over 3 months, depending on demand levels. The heavy vehicle road user charge will also be cut to zero for 3 months, saving trucking operators 32.4 cents per litre. Economists warn the excise cut could increase fuel demand, potentially raising inflation and prompting the Reserve Bank to hike interest rates again in May. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the excise cut will save $19 on a 65-litre tank, while Guardian frames the benefit as more significant for UTE drivers but does not quantify this difference. ABC cites economist Chris Richardson warning the cut keeps inflation higher for longer, but Guardian frames this as a risk of * bringing forward * potential fuel rationing without direct evidence. ABC states the coalition estimated fuel demand would rise by 1 to 2%, or one day's national stockpile, while Guardian does not reference this specific demand projection. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Romanian nationals charged for targeting elderly shoppers in Queensland shopping centres via wallet scams. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 3 Romanian nationals, 2 men aged 49 and 42, 1 woman aged 29, were arrested in 8 Mile Plains on the 28th of March, 2024 for allegedly targeting elderly victims, aged 70 to 94, at Queensland shopping centres. The trio allegedly used a wallet-dropping scam, claiming to have dropped their wallet while victims used ATMs or paid for groceries, then stole wallets and fraudulently used cards. Victims were targeted in Kenmore, Chermside, Strathpine, North Lakes, Buddina, Caloundra, and Laidley shopping centres. Police seized approximately $20,000 from a unit complex in 8 Mile Plains during the arrests. The 49-year-old man and 29-year-old woman were charged with multiple counts of fraud and stealing, 5 counts of fraud, 4 counts of stealing, and 2 counts of enter with intent for the 49-year-old, 8 counts of fraud and 4 counts of stealing for the 29-year-old, and refused bail. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the 2 sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. North Korea's cyber espionage and fraud operation targeting Australian firms via fake IT jobs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. North Korea's regime uses an army of thousands of undercover operatives posing as remote IT workers to infiltrate Western companies, estimated to generate $800 million annually for the regime according to the United Nations. ASIO, Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, has identified North Korean operatives targeting Australian firms to funnel salaries back to Pyongyang, with major banks like NAB confirmed as infiltrated. A Melbourne University alumnus-turned-suspected regime intermediary is under assessment by the Australian Federal Police's cyber threat teams. North Korean agents use AI to alter appearance and voice during job interviews, and to scour job advertisements online, as demonstrated by the case of Aaron Pearson, also known as David Yee and David Rose. Christina Chapman, a US laptop farmer, was jailed for 8.5 years after funneling $17 million to North Korea by hosting computers for North Korean IT workers hired by over 300 US firms including Boeing, NBC, and Nike. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between sources. Both articles are nearly identical in content and reporting. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Italian PM Giorgia Meloni's referendum defeat on judicial reform and its political fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Giorgia Meloni's government proposed a constitutional reform to separate the careers of judges and public prosecutors, dividing the Consiglio Superiore della Magistratura, CSM, into two separate bodies, with a third disciplinary council. The referendum was held on October 13 to 14, 2024, with the no vote winning 53.2% to 46.8%, Guardian, and nearly 54% to just over 46%, ABC. The reform would have required judges and prosecutors to be chosen through a lottery system rather than a vote by peers, with 1/3 of members appointed by Parliament. Turnout was approximately 59%, ABC, and 53.2% to 46.8% vote breakdown, Guardian, confirmed by official figures. Meloni's coalition includes Brothers of Italy, which has maintained stable approval ratings since 2022, despite this setback. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the no vote was 53.2% to 46.8%, while ABC reports it as nearly 54% to just over 46%, a slight but notable discrepancy in the exact percentages. The Guardian explicitly links Trump's Iran strike to mobilizing no voters, while ABC does not mention this specific connection between the war and the referendum outcome. The Guardian describes the opposition as broad and diverse, dominated by the Democratic Party and Five Star Movement, but ABC frames Five Star's Conti as declaring an eviction notice for the government, implying a more unified opposition stance. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's inflation outlook amid Middle East conflict and RBA rate decisions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. February CPI rose 3.7% year-on-year, down 0.1% from January's 3.8%, with underlying inflation steady at 3.3%, ABC, Guardian, news.com.au. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, lifted interest rates for the second time in 2026, citing a tight labour market and capacity pressures, ABC, news.com.au. The US-Israel-Iran conflict began on February 28, 2026, and energy price spikes from the war are expected to be reflected in March's CPI data, ABC, Guardian, news.com.au. Treasurer Jim Chalmers warned the Middle East war could push inflation above 5% and worsen economic growth, ABC, news.com.au. Unleaded petrol prices in Sydney averaged 166.0 c-litre in February but surged to 248.7 c-litre by mid-March, a 29% increase since the conflict began, Guardian, news.com.au. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports wage rises in enterprise bargaining agreements fell to 3.7% in the December quarter, 2025, while the RBA continues to cite wage pressures as a driver of inflation, Guardian versus implied RBA stance. The Guardian states investors briefly priced in a cash rate of 4.85% by year-end, but ABC and news.com.au focus on 4.6% as the more likely peak, Guardian versus abcnews.com.au. The Guardian highlights that February's petrol prices fell 3.4% over the month, while ABC and news.com.au emphasize the post-war surge to 29% plus increases, Guardian versus abcnews.com.au. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicolas Maduro's US court appearance for narco-terrorism charges and legal funding dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores were captured in Caracas on the 3rd of January, 2024 by US Special Forces during a pre-dawn raid. Maduro and Flores face a narco-terrorism indictment in Manhattan Federal Court, with potential life imprisonment if convicted. Maduro and Flores pleaded not guilty during their 5 January arraignment in New York. Prosecutors and Maduro's defense are disputing whether Venezuela's government can fund his legal defense under U.S. sanctions. Demonstrators both for and against Maduro's capture gathered outside the Manhattan courthouse during his court appearances. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states the U.S. raid in Caracas killed 100 people, but Guardian Article 2 does not specify a number of deaths and only mentions reportedly killed 100 people without confirmation. Guardian Article 1 describes Maduro as slimmed down since his last court appearance, but this detail is not mentioned in the other sources. ABC reports Trump announced further charges during a cabinet meeting, while Guardian Article 1 and 2 do not mention this specific timing or context for Trump's statement. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrest and charges in Sydney grandfather's mistaken identity kidnapping and murder case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Declan James Donnelly, 23, was arrested on Wednesday morning at his Seven Hills public housing address and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Chris Baghsarian, a 85-year-old Sydney grandfather mistakenly abducted on February 13, 2024. Donnelly was captured on CCTV at Baghsarian's North Ryde home at the time of the kidnapping and later near an abandoned Dural home where Baghsarian was allegedly tortured and killed. Donnelly was arrested wearing only his underwear and his Facebook profile picture was updated on February 16, 2 days after police believe Baghsarian's body was dumped near a golf club in Pitt Town, Sydney's northwest. Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were previously charged with Baghsarian's kidnapping and murder and remain in custody. They were allegedly recruited by Donnelly to assist in the abduction. Police seized and sawn-off shotgun, ammunition, and prohibited drugs, including heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and cannabis, at Donnelly's Seven Hills home. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH states Donnelly updated his Facebook profile picture on February 16, 2 days after Baghsarian's body was dumped, while Newscomau does not mention this detail. Newscomau specifies Donnelly allegedly murdered Baghsarian between February 13 morning and 9 p.m. on February 14, but SMH does not provide a specific timeframe for the murder beyond shortly after the mistake was realized. SMH reports Donnelly was allegedly contracted to kidnap Dimitri Stepanyan's father, linked to the Alamdine crime family, while ABC does not mention Stepanyan or the crime family connection. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US government funding standoff over DHS, TSA pay delays and ICE funding dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The US Senate passed a DHS funding bill on Friday night, March 29, that funds most DHS components, TSA, Coast Guard, FEMA, but excludes ICE and part of CBP, reported in Articles 1, 2, and 3. TSA staff have worked without pay since mid-February, February 13, due to the partial government funding lapse, mentioned in Articles 1, 2, and 3. The Senate approved the funding package by voice vote in a rare overnight session, per Articles 2 and 3. House Republicans rejected the Senate's bipartisan DHS funding deal on Friday, March 29, and passed their own bill fully funding TSA, ICE, and Border Patrol, reported in Article 1. Donald Trump ordered executive action on March 29 to pay TSA agents immediately, as reported in Articles 1 and 2. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the House passed a stopgap DHS funding bill on March 29, while Articles 2 and 3 report the Senate passed a funding bill on March 29, with the House yet to act. Article 1 claims the Senate's bipartisan bill was rejected by the House on March 29, while Articles 2 and 3 state the Senate passed a funding bill on March 29 and the House has not yet acted on it. Article 1 says Trump's memorandum ordering TSA pay was signed on March 29, with paychecks expected as early as March 30, while Article 2 states Trump announced the order on March 29 but does not specify the exact date of signing. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Deadly LaGuardia Airport plane crash involving Air Canada jet and fire truck. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. An Air Canada Express regional jet, operated by Jazz Aviation, collided with a Port Authority fire truck at LaGuardia Airport on Sunday night, October 27, around 11:45 p.m. local time. The crash occurred on runway 4 at LaGuardia Airport, Queens, New York, killing both pilots, Antoine Forrest, 30, and Mackenzie Gunther, 2023 Seneca College graduate, and injuring 41 others, including 2 Port Authority employees in the fire truck. The fire truck was responding to a reported odor issue on a United Airlines flight, and the plane was cleared to land before the truck was cleared to cross the runway. Audio recordings show an air traffic controller admitting "I messed up" and repeatedly ordering the fire truck to stop just seconds before the collision. The fire truck lacked a transponder, preventing the ASDEX surface surveillance system from alerting controllers to its presence on the runway. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports pilot safety concerns were filed with NASA's system months before the crash, but this detail is not mentioned in any other source. ABC and Newscom Australia both report the controller admitted "I messed up," but Newscom Australia's Harvey Skonnick explicitly calls the controller brain dead, a stronger and more inflammatory term. The Guardian states the NTSB chair, Jennifer Homendy, was delayed by security lines in Houston, while ABC and Newscom Australia do not mention this specific delay. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian public school teachers strike over pay and conditions in 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australian Education Union, AEU, organised a 24-hour strike on Tuesday, 2024, involving up to 30,000 Victorian public school teachers, principals, and education support staff. The strike is the first in Victoria's public school system since 2013, with classes cancelled or significantly disrupted at about 500 schools. The Fair Work Commission approved the strike after 98% of AEU members voted in favour, citing low pay and excessive workloads as key grievances. The AEU sought a 35% pay rise over 4 years, smaller class sizes, and improved mental health and classroom support in Enterprise Bargaining Agreement (EBA) negotiations. The Victorian government offered an 18.5% pay package, including an 8% rise for teachers and 4% for support staff in April, followed by 3% annual increases and a 1.5% overtime allowance. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reported that the Victorian Education Department spokesperson said schools would remain open but only provide supervision for a limited number of students, while Newscom did not mention this specific detail about supervision limits. The Guardian explicitly stated that principals planned to offer supervision only for children of emergency workers, but Newscom did not include this detail. The Guardian mentioned the IEU's General Secretary, David Breer, explicitly supporting the AEU and criticising Victorian salaries, while Newscom did not reference the IEU statement. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Qantas Jetstar reduces NZ flights due to rising jet fuel prices amid global fuel crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jetstar is reducing 12% of flights between Auckland and Sydney, and Auckland and Brisbane from May due to rising jet fuel prices. Jetstar has contacted affected passengers directly, offering most same-day travel alternatives. Air New Zealand also reduced flights earlier this month, March 16 to May 3, citing unprecedented volatility in jet fuel prices due to the Middle East conflict. The Middle East conflict is cited as a primary driver of rising jet fuel prices in both articles. Vietnam Airlines plans to cancel 20-plus domestic flights weekly and suspend 7 domestic routes starting next month due to fuel shortages. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Air New Zealand's reductions were due to unprecedented volatility in jet fuel prices, while Newscomau does not specify the exact reason beyond lower demand or off-peak times. ABC reports Vietnam Airlines will cancel 20-plus domestic flights weekly and suspend 7 routes starting next month, but Newscomau does not mention the 7-route suspension. Newscomau states 55 flights have been cut from Jetstar's schedule, while ABC does not specify the exact number beyond 12% of services. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian Liberal pre-selection crisis over Moira Deeming's removal and Dinesh Gourisetty's contested withdrawal. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Moira Deeming lost Liberal pre-selection for the Western Metropolitan Region Upper House seat on Sunday, November 2024, to Dinesh Gourisetty, 39 votes, over Deeming's 26 votes, with Trung Law receiving 3 votes. Dinesh Gourisetty provided a character reference for Kashyap Patel, who pleaded guilty in 2024 to grooming, sexually assaulting, and transmitting indecent communication to a child under 16, receiving a 9-month prison sentence and a 2-year community correction order. Kashyap Patel's conviction involved a 15-year-old girl, with charges dating back to 2021, and the county court judge described Patel as a man of otherwise good character based on 3 references, including Gourisetty's. Victorian Liberal leader Jess Wilson stated on Monday that Gourisetty is not welcome on her team after the character reference revelation, and the party's state executive accepted Gourisetty's withdrawal from the ticket. Moira Deeming was expelled from the Liberal Parliamentary Party room in 2023 after threatening defamation action against then-leader John Pesutto, who was later found to have defamed her in court, ordered to pay $300,000 in damages and $2.3 million in legal costs. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and The Guardian report that Dinesh Gourisetty's letter to the party executive stated he had not formally withdrawn his candidacy, but Philip Davis, party president, said Gourisetty had advised me he has withdrawn in an email to the executive committee. The Guardian and The Age report that Gourisetty's character reference described Patel as very upset about the charges and that Gourisetty believed Patel was contesting the charges, but the county court judge's remarks imply Patel's guilt was established before the reference was provided. ABC states that Gourisetty's letter to the party executive was published today, while The Guardian and The Age report that the letter was seen obtained by their outlets on Monday morning. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Death of married at first sight expert Mel Schilling from colon cancer at age 54. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Mel Schilling died on Tuesday at age 54 from colon cancer that had metastasized to her brain. Schilling was diagnosed with colon cancer in December 2023 and underwent surgery to remove a 5 cm tumor. In February 2024, routine scans revealed small nodules in her lungs indicating metastasis. She underwent 16 rounds of chemotherapy over 2 years before announcing her terminal diagnosis in March 2026. Schilling joined the Australian version of Married at First Sight in 2016 and the UK version in 2021. But not all outlets told the same story. Thej and SMH both report Schilling's cancer spread to her brain in December 2025, but ABC_2 states she experienced symptoms over Christmas 2025 and was diagnosed terminal in early 2026, no exact month specified. No contradictions in core factual details, all sources align on key dates, names, and events. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iranian Australians and global Iranians celebrate Nowruz amid war and government suppression. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nowruz began on March 21, 2024, marking the Persian New Year and spring equinox. Nowruz is a 3000-plus-year-old festival with origins tied to Zoroastrianism, predating Islam. The halved scene table is a central Nowruz tradition featuring 7 symbolic items starting with the letter S in Farsi. Iranians in Tehran were seen buying sprouts and flowers for Nowruz despite ongoing war and threats of attacks. Saleh Mohammadi, a 19-year-old Iranian wrestler, was executed by the regime on March 14, 2024, for alleged protest involvement. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Nowruz has been celebrated for over 3,000 years, while Article 2 claims it is more than 2,000 years old. Article 1 mentions the halved scene table includes photographs of those killed by the Islamic regime or US-Israel strikes, but Article 2 does not mention this detail. Article 1 describes the halved scene table as a quiet merging of ritual and remembrance with photographs of the dead, while Article 2 does not provide this specific detail about the table's inclusion of such photographs. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Jannik Sinner wins Miami Open title to complete Sunshine Double, defeating Jiri Lehecka in final. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jannik Sinner won the Miami Open title with a 6-3, 7-6, 4 victory over Alexander Zverev in the semifinals. Sinner then defeated Jiri Lehecka 6-4, 6-4 in the final to complete the Sunshine Double, Indian Wells and Miami Open. Lehecka reached his first Masters 1000 final after defeating Arthur Fils 6-2, 6-2 in the semifinals. Sinner entered the Miami Open with 11,800 ranking points, more than double Alexander Zverev's 5,205 points. Sinner has won his last 7 matches against Alexander Zverev since August 2024, including the last 10 sets. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Sinner won the Miami semi-final against Zverev in straight sets, 6-3, 7-6, while Article 2 does not mention the semi-final score. Article 1 describes the Miami semi-final as a tough match where Zverev held his own and played a good match, while Article 2 focuses solely on the final and Lehecka's dominance. Article 1 notes Sinner's drop shots and slices have been scrutinized since the US Open, but Article 2 does not mention this aspect of his game. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory records multiple deaths in police custody within a week. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 25-year-old man died in police custody in Darwin's northern suburbs on Tuesday evening after being placed in the rear cage of a police vehicle and experiencing laboured breathing. He was pronounced dead at Royal Darwin Hospital at 10:10 p.m, ABC, Guardian, ABC, news.com.au. The 25-year-old man was arrested around 8:40 p.m. on Tuesday in Casuarina after reports of damaging window louvers and assaulting a woman at Taiwi Gardens Retirement Village, ABC, Guardian, ABC. A 26-year-old man died at Darwin Correctional Centre in Hulse on Saturday morning, found unresponsive by correctional officers at around 7:50 a.m. Medical assistance was provided but he was declared deceased at the scene, Guardian, ABC, ABC. The death of the 26-year-old at Darwin Correctional Centre is not believed to be suspicious, Guardian, ABC. Both the 25-year-old's death in police custody and the 26-year-old's death in correctional custody are being investigated by the coroner, Guardian, ABC, ABC, news.com.au. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, ABC, states the 25-year-old man was arrested without incident, while Article 2, Guardian, does not mention this detail. Article 3, ABC, reports the 25-year-old man was a 25-year-old Indigenous man, but Article 1, ABC, does not specify his Indigenous status. Article 4, news.com.au, states the 19-year-old stabbing victim was found in a car with serious stab wounds southeast of Darwin, while Article 5, ABC, specifies the location as Hulse Crescent, Catherine East. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Tropical Cyclone Narelle's unprecedented path and impacts across Australia's northern and western regions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tropical Cyclone Narelle formed in the Coral Sea off Queensland on March 17, 2026, and made landfall in 3 states' territories: Queensland, Northern Territory, Western Australia, the first such event in over 20 years. Narelle made landfall in Western Australia as a Category 4 system on March 28, 2026, near Exmouth, with sustained winds of 185 to 200 km per hour and gusts up to 250 to 275 km per hour. Exmouth, WA, experienced catastrophic damage including roofs torn off buildings, marina flooding, power outages, and the destruction of the local airport, Learmonth Airport, with over 300 mm of rain recorded at the airport. Cyclone Narelle caused significant flooding in Onslow, WA, with streets inundated and homes affected, and heavy rainfall of 100 to 200 mm across the Pilbara and Gascoyne regions. The cyclone disrupted operations at Chevron's Gorgon and Wheatstone LNG facilities, halting LNG and domestic gas production in the Pilbara region. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and The Guardian both report that Narelle made landfall in WA as a Category 4 system, but ABC initially reported it could briefly reach Category 5 strength before weakening, while The Guardian and other sources emphasize the Category 4 strength at landfall. ABC and The Guardian both report that Narelle caused significant damage to Exmouth, but ABC reports the airport was obliterated while The Guardian describes it as extensively damaged. ABC and The Guardian both report that Narelle caused power outages in Exmouth and Carnarvon, but ABC reports around 2,000 homes without power, while The Guardian does not specify the exact number of homes affected. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia warns Israel against occupying southern Lebanon amid escalating conflict with Hezbollah. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong warned Israel against occupying southern Lebanon in calls with Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar on March 2024. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz announced plans to create a security zone between the Israeli border, Blue Line, and the Litani River in southern Lebanon. Over 1,000 Lebanese civilians have been killed since Israel began striking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including over 100 children and 40 medics, Lebanon's health ministry figures. More than 1 million Lebanese civilians have been displaced due to the conflict in southern Lebanon. Australia has urged Australians in Lebanon to leave now if safe to do so due to the escalating violence. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Newscomer both report over 1,000 Lebanese deaths, but ABC specifies 1,000+, including 120 children and 40 medics, while Newscomer states 100+ children without mentioning medics. The Guardian reports Australia has provided $5 million in aid, but this detail is not mentioned in ABC or Newscomer. ABC and Newscomer both cite Israel's security zone plans up to the Litani River, but The Guardian clarifies Katz's statement as controlling remaining bridges and the security zone up to the Litani a more specific phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Stephen Colbert co-writing a new Lord of the Rings film titled Shadow of the Past. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stephen Colbert is co-writing a new Lord of the Rings film titled Lord of the Rings, Shadow of the Past. The film will be developed by Colbert, his son Peter McGee, and Philippe Boyens, original trilogy screenwriter. Peter Jackson is involved in the project as producer alongside Fran Walsh and Philippe Boyens. The film is set 14 years after the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, following Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Sam's daughter Eleanor discovers a secret explaining why the War of the Ring was nearly lost before it began. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian, Article 1, suggests the film will focus on Tom Bombadil as a central character, while ABC, Article 2, does not mention Bombadil at all. Guardian, Article 1, implies the film will be a loose adaptation of chapters 3 to 8, while Guardian, Article 3, states Colbert specifically wanted to adapt those chapters into a standalone story. Guardian, Article 1, criticizes the film's potential as a very expensive shrug due to Bombadil's lack of plot relevance, while Guardian, Article 3, does not include this critique. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian waste sector faces diesel shortages threatening service disruptions and public health risks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Waste Contractors and Recyclers Association of NSW Chief Brett Lemon wrote a letter to the Federal Energy Minister warning of potentially catastrophic health and environmental consequences if garbage collection stops due to diesel shortages. Queensland Waste Recycling Industry Association CEO Alison Price stated some members have received less than half their regular diesel allocations, with one operator getting only 12,000L instead of 50,000L fortnightly. WA Waste Management and Recycling Association Chief Mike Bobrowicz reported West Australian operators expect only about half their regular diesel allocations at next refill. The federal government temporarily lowered the safe temperature threshold for diesel imports to allow more supplies from Canada, Europe, and the US. Waste industry leaders, Brett Lemon, Alison Price, Mike Bobrowicz, are scheduled to meet with Assistant Environment Minister Josh Wilson in Canberra this week to advocate for priority fuel access. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia and EU sign long-awaited free trade and security partnership after 8 years of negotiations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement, FTA, was signed on Tuesday, the 10th of September, 2024, after 8 years of negotiations, with leaders Anthony Albanese and Ursula von der Leyen finalising terms in Canberra. The agreement will open a market of approximately 450 million people for Australian exporters, with an estimated annual economic benefit of $10 billion for Australia. The deal includes a market access quota for Australian red meat of 30,000 tonnes annually, representing a 500% increase on current exports. The EU dropped demands for Australia to abolish its luxury car tax and scrapped tariffs on Australian critical minerals as part of the agreement. The Australia-EU Security and Defence Partnership was also finalised, focusing on defence industry cooperation, cybersecurity, counter-terrorism, and shared resilience. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau reports opposition Senator Matt Canavan called the deal not a free trade deal and criticised its limited red meat access, while the ABC and Guardian do not include this direct opposition criticism in their headlines or summaries. The ABC states the NFF President Hamish McIntyre urged Australia to walk away from the deal if red meat access did not improve, but Newscomau does not attribute this exact sentiment to Canavan or the NFF. Newscomau claims the EU dropped demands for Australia to axe the luxury car tax and scrap tariffs on critical minerals, while the ABC confirms these concessions but adds that some geographic indicator names, e.g., Prosecco, Parmesan, may still be phased out on exports, a detail not mentioned in Newscomau. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Air Canada CEO's bilingual language failure after fatal airport crash in NYC. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2 pilots were killed in a collision between an Air Canada Express jet and a Port Authority fire truck at New York's LaGuardia Airport on Sunday night, local time. The pilots killed were Antoine Forrest, from Quebec, and Mackenzie Gunther, a 2023 graduate of Seneca College's aviation program. Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau released an English-only condolence video on Thursday, sparking controversy for not addressing the tragedy in French. Rousseau acknowledged in a statement he does not speak French fluently, saying his limited French has diverted attention from the profound grief of the families. The NTSB revealed the runway safety system, ASDEX, did not trigger before the crash because the fire truck lacked a transponder. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the NTSB's Jennifer Homendy cautioned pointing fingers at controllers and saying distraction was involved, while The Guardian does not mention this specific caution from Homendy. News Kamau reports the NTSB's Homendy saying we rarely, if ever, investigate a major accident where it was one failure, but The Guardian omits this exact phrasing about layered safety defenses. The Guardian claims Rousseau's condolence video included French subtitles, but News Kamau does not mention subtitles, only that Rousseau's limited French has diverted attention. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. AFL umpire error controversy in Geelong vs Adelaide match where ARC failed to overturn a free kick. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The AFL admitted Geelong was incorrectly awarded a last disposal free kick in the fourth quarter of the match at Cardinia Park on Thursday night, April 11, 2024. Tom Atkins, Geelong, kicked the ball out of bounds in a contest with Zach Taylor, Adelaide, on the wing and was awarded the free kick despite the ball appearing to come off his boot. The AFL Review Centre, ARC, did not have time to intervene before the ball came back into play, leading to the incorrect decision standing. Geelong won the match 9.14-68 to 9.6-60 by 8 points, with Jack Martin kicking a crucial goal after the free kick. Adelaide coach Matthew Nicks refused to blame the umpiring decision for the loss, focusing instead on losing contested possession. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention David King's term stooged or his specific assessment that Atkins' play was obvious and clear boot, while Theege includes this quote. ABC does not reference Jason Dunstall's call for the procedural rule to be changed or his description of it as a farce, while Theege includes this opinion. ABC does not provide a detailed breakdown of the match context, e.g., Adelaide's 22 more inside 50s, territory battle, or weather conditions, while Theege includes these specifics. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrests and investigation into alleged mistaken identity kidnapping and murder of 85-year-old Chris Baghsarian in Sydney. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chris Baghsarian, 85, was allegedly kidnapped from his North Ryde home on February 13 around 5 a.m. in a case of mistaken identity. Baghsarian's remains were found near a golf club in Pitt Town on February 24, 11 days after his disappearance. Two men, Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were arrested and charged with murder and kidnapping with intent to ransom or cause grievous bodily harm in February. A 23-year-old man and 23-year-old woman were arrested on March 20 during a search warrant at a Seven Hills property, with firearms, drugs, and electronic devices seized. The man arrested on March 20 was charged with murder, multiple drug offences, unauthorised firearm possession, and facilitating the kidnapping and body disposal. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the man was clad in nothing but his underwear during arrest, while ABC and Guardian do not mention this detail. News Kamau explicitly charges the woman with contravening an AVO, but ABC and Guardian do not mention this charge. News Kamau reports the man was physically involved in the abduction and transported Baghsarian, while ABC's summary is less specific about his role. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former AFL player Leigh Ryswyk becomes first openly gay male player in league history. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Leigh Ryswyk is the first past or present AFL player to publicly come out as gay. Ryswyk played one AFL match for the Brisbane Lions in 2005 against Fremantle at Subiaco Oval. He was delisted by the Brisbane Lions at the end of the 2005 season after his AFL debut. Ryswyk played 226 matches for North Adelaide in the SANFL and is a life member of the club. He came out publicly during an interview on Joy 94.9's GayFL radio program in 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between sources. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont from South Australian Outback Station. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gus Lamont, a 4-year-old with golden curls, was last seen on September 27, 2025, at Oak Park Station near Yunta, South Australia. Gus was reported missing at approximately 8:30 p.m. after his grandmother searched for him for 3 hours without finding him. The property where Gus disappeared spans 60,000 hectares, ABC, 40 square kilometers area searched. Newscamau confirms 60,000 hectares total. Police declared Gus's disappearance a major crime in February 2026, ruling out theories he wandered off or was abducted. Task Force Horizon, a 12-member specialist team, was formed in October 2025 to investigate the case. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports police ruled out abduction due to the property's remote location and lack of obvious access, but Newscamau does not mention this specific reasoning. ABC states police seized a car and electronic devices from a suspect residing at the station, while Newscamau does not mention seized assets. ABC describes the property as about 40 kilometers south of Yunta, implying proximity to Yunta, but Newscamau does not specify distance from Yunta. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Bill Cosby Civil Sexual Assault Trial Verdict and Damages Award. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bill Cosby was found liable for drugging and sexually assaulting Donna Motzinger in 1972 by a California civil jury in 2024. Donna Motzinger was awarded $19.25 million in damages by the jury in the civil case against Cosby. Motzinger alleged Cosby drugged her with wine and pills, believed to be aspirin, before she was sexually assaulted in 1972. Motzinger woke up in her home wearing only underwear after the incident, according to her lawsuit. Cosby's attorney Jennifer Bonjean stated they plan to appeal the verdict. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the jury deliberated for 3 days, while ABC reports the jury deliberated for just over 1 day. ABC specifies the jury awarded $17.5 million for past damages and $1.75 million for future damages, but The Guardian does not break down the $19.25 million award into these categories. The Guardian mentions punitive damages would be determined later on Monday, while ABC states the punitive damages phase starts later in the week, after the main verdict. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teenage assault on paramedic after stolen car crash in Melbourne. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 teenage males were travelling in a stolen Mazda 3 that collided with a Volkswagen Jetta at Nicholson St and Victoria Parade, Carlton, just before 6 a.m. on Saturday. 2 teenagers fled the scene immediately after the crash. A 19-year-old male and a 15-year-old male were injured in the crash, with the 19-year-old suffering serious injuries. A 66-year-old man and 76-year-old woman from Terang were in the Volkswagen and taken to hospital as a precaution. The Mazda 3 was stolen from Mulgrave on March 21. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the 19-year-old was seriously injured and the 15-year-old received minor injuries, but Newscomau does not specify injury severity for the 19-year-old. ABC says one of the injured males assaulted a paramedic, while Newscomau specifies the 15-year-old assaulted the paramedic. ABC refers to the two teenagers in custody as two boys, while Newscomau does not mention custody status for any teens. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US court rulings hold Meta and Google liable for social media addiction and harm to minors. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A California jury found Meta, Instagram, and YouTube liable for negligence and failure to warn, awarding $3 million, $4.3 million AUD, in compensatory damages to a 20-year-old plaintiff, KGM, on May 22, 2024. The jury split liability 70% to Meta and 30% to YouTube, with punitive damages pending in a second phase of the trial. The plaintiff, known as KGM, testified she began using YouTube at age 6 and Instagram at 9, and developed depression, self-harm, and body dysmorphia by age 10. A separate New Mexico jury ordered Meta to pay $375 million, $539.8 million AUD, in civil penalties for misleading consumers about platform safety and enabling child sexual exploitation on Facebook-Instagram on May 21, 2024. Meta and YouTube both plan to appeal the California verdict, with Meta stating it respectfully disagrees and will evaluate legal options. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reported Meta's internal documents showed employees discussing targeting 11-year-olds like tobacco companies, but Meta's spokesperson denied the platforms were to blame for teen mental health issues, calling them profoundly complex. ABC noted YouTube disputed the plaintiff's usage records, claiming she averaged less than a minute per day, while the plaintiff testified she used the platform extensively from age 6. The Guardian and ABC both reported Meta's defense strategy blamed the plaintiff's mother for her mental health issues, but the Guardian emphasized jurors rejected this narrative entirely, while ABC did not specify juror reactions to this defense. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sheffield Shield cricket final between Victoria and South Australia at Junction Oval. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Sheffield Shield final was played at Melbourne's Junction Oval between Victoria and South Australia. Victoria finished top of the table with 7 wins from 10 matches in the regular season. South Australia is the reigning champion and was attempting to win successive titles for the first time. Alex Carey scored a half-century, 50+, for South Australia on day 4 of the match. Scott Boland took 2 wickets in consecutive balls, Liam Scott and Ben Menenti, early in day 4. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention the no-ball controversy over Oliver Peake's dismissal, while The Guardian highlights it as a key point. ABC states South Australia was 7-122 after Boland's double strike on day 4, while The Guardian says Victoria was 122-7 at that stage. ABC does not specify the final score of Victoria's second innings, while The Guardian states Victoria was bowled out for 139. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.